At my son's birthday party, he introduced me to his boss as just our housekeeper. He even added, "We let her stay out of pity, she's good with a mop." But then he froze when his boss said, "Are you sure? I know her." What happened next shattered everything. Before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Sheila Glover from Flint, Michigan. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. My name is Rose Martinez. I thought being a mom meant love would always win. I was so wrong. The big house in Maple Ridge had become my cage for 3 long years. A beautiful Victorian home that my late husband Carlos and I bought when dreams still felt possible. Now my son Diego and his wife Carmen lived here, claiming they moved in to help me after Carlos passed away. What they really wanted was free babysitting for their little girl Sophia and someone to cook their meals while they worked at their fancy jobs downtown. I should have noticed the warning signs much earlier. The way Carmen would tell her book club friends that I was Diego's mother who helps around the house, never saying this was actually my home that I owned. The way Diego would ask me to hide my personal things when his work friends visited, like I was something embarrassing to be ashamed of. The way they would talk about money problems right in front of me, discussing whether they could afford to keep paying for my food and medicine, as if I was some stray cat they found. But I stayed quiet. Heaven knows why I stayed quiet. I stayed because I thought family love was stronger than pride. Because I believed that if I just kept giving and caring, they would remember how much I meant to them. Because I was holding on to hope that my children would one day see all the things I had done for them. The morning of Diego's 35th birthday was rainy and cold, just like how I felt inside. I had been awake since 4 in the morning making his favorite foods for the party. Fresh tamales, Spanish rice, and his birthday cake made from scratch just like when he was little. Carmen had demanded a perfect party for Diego's office friends, but perfect in their world meant I would spend all day cooking while she got all the praise for my hard work. "Mama, make sure everything looks nice," Diego said while drinking coffee and checking his phone. "Mr. Thompson is coming tonight. He's the big boss at my company and he could help me get promoted. This party has to be perfect." I nodded and smiled like I always did. "Course, Mijo. Everything will be ready for you." Carmen came downstairs wearing an expensive red dress that probably cost more than what most families spend on groceries for a month. She was already talking on her phone, making plans to get her nails done and meet friends for lunch while I did all the work. "Rose, I put some cleaning stuff in the closet. The windows in the living room have spots, and there are marks on the kitchen cabinets. Oh, and please stay in the kitchen tonight. Diego's work people don't need to know about our family situation." Our family situation. Like my being his mother was something bad to hide. I spent the whole morning cleaning rooms that were already clean, making food I wouldn't be allowed to eat with the guests, and listening to Carmen give me orders like I was her maid. Diego went to work early, leaving me to make our home look perfect for his work show. By 6 o'clock, the house was beautiful. The fancy glasses sparkled under the dining room light that Carlos and I had picked out for our anniversary dinner 20 years ago. The table was set with my mother's best dishes that looked like they belonged in a magazine. The smell of fresh flowers that I bought with my own small savings filled the air. The guests started coming around 7. I watched through the kitchen window as fancy cars parked outside. Well-dressed men in expensive suits and women wearing jewelry that cost more than what I used to make in a year at my old job. These were Diego's new friends now. The fancy world he joined when he decided that having a working mother was something to be embarrassed about instead of proud of. I stayed hidden in the kitchen, putting food on pretty plates and filling wine glasses that Carmen would take out and pretend she made everything. Through the doorway, I could see Diego laughing and telling stories about his successes at work. He looked so much like Carlos when he was young. Before we struggled with money. Before Carlos got sick. Before the heart problems took him away from us when he was only 57 years old. "Rose!" Carmen's sharp voice broke into my thoughts. "We need more of those little cheese things, and we're almost out of wine." I nodded and went back to my work. invisible and quiet. This was my job now, to make everything perfect while others got all the thanks and attention. Around 9 o'clock, a man I had never seen before walked into the kitchen. He was older than the other guests, maybe in his late 60s, with gray hair and gentle eyes behind small glasses. He walked like someone who was used to people listening when he spoke. "Excuse me," he said in a kind voice. "I'm looking for the bathroom." "Down the hall, first door on your left," I said, not looking up from the dishes I was washing. He didn't leave right away. "You know, this food is amazing. Did Carmen make all of this herself?" Something in the way he asked made me look up. There was a smart look in his eyes, like he already knew the real answer. "No, sir," I said softly. "I made it all." He nodded slowly. "I thought so. She doesn't seem like someone who knows how to cook. I'm Robert Thompson, by the way." My hands stopped moving in the soapy water. This was Diego's boss, the important man who could help Diego get promoted. And here I was, meeting him while wearing an apron and cleaning up after a party I wasn't invited to join. "Rose Martinez," I said, drying my hands on a kitchen towel. "Diego's mother." "Ah." His face changed, becoming more interested. "I see. Well, Mrs. Martinez, you should know that your cooking is better than most fancy restaurants. Diego is very lucky to have such a talented mother." Before I could answer, Diego's loud voice came from the living room. "Mr. Thompson, there you are. I was just telling everyone about the big case we won last month." Mr. Thompson looked toward the living room, then back at me. "It was very nice meeting you, Mrs. Martinez. I think we'll talk again very soon." He left me standing there, confused by his strange words, but too tired to think about what he meant. The party was ending soon, and I had many hours of cleaning ahead of me. It was almost midnight when the last guest finally went home. Carmen had gone upstairs, saying she was too tired to help clean, leaving me to put the house back to normal. Diego stayed in the living room, taking off his tie and pouring himself a big glass of whiskey from the bottle that used to belong to Carlos. "Sofia is getting bigger. She'll start school next year, and we won't need you to watch her as much." He still wouldn't look at me. "We've been thinking maybe it's time for you to get your own little apartment. You know, start a new life for yourself." The words hit me like someone had slapped me in the face. After everything I had done, everything I had given up, they wanted to throw me away like garbage. "This is my house, Diego," I said quietly. "Actually, Mama, it's not." His voice was cold, like talking to a stranger. "Papa left the house to me in his will. You can live here as long as you want, but that doesn't mean you have to. We think it would be better if you found a small place that's easier for an older person to take care of." I stared at him, this stranger who looked like my son, and felt something break inside my heart. The love I had carried for him, the hope I had kept alive even when he treated me badly, started turning into something cold and angry. "I see," I whispered. He finally looked at me. Then, and for just a second, I saw that he knew he had said something terrible. But it was too late. The damage was done, and the mother who had spent her whole life putting her family first was finally completely gone. The next morning brought no sorry words, no hugs, no talk about the terrible things said the night before. Diego left for work early, humming happily while he fixed his tie in the hallway mirror. Carmen came out of her bedroom in exercise clothes, already talking on her phone, making plans for her daily massage and lunch with friends she had never introduced me to. "Rose, I'm meeting people for brunch," she announced without looking at me. "Sofia needs to be at dance class by 10. Don't forget her water bottle and her special shoes." I nodded, watching her grab her purse and keys. "No please. No thank you." No kind words after I had spent the night before working like their servant while they had fun with guests in my own home. After she left, I sat in the kitchen with my coffee, looking out at the garden that Carlos and I had planted together 15 years ago. The roses he had given me for Mother's Day were blooming. Bright pink flowers that reminded me of happiness from long ago. Everything looked the same as yesterday. But something important had changed. I could see clearly now. I could see my life the way it really was for the first time in years. I wasn't a loving mother being cared for by thankful children. I was free work, someone useful, a woman whose love and sacrifices had been forgotten the moment they became inconvenient to remember. Little Sophia, God bless her, was the only honest person in the house. At 6 years old, she said exactly what she thought without trying to be polite. "Abuela Rose, why don't you have your own house?" she asked while I helped her put on her dance shoes. "This is my house, sweetheart," I said gently. "But Daddy says it's his house now, and you just help clean it because you're old and don't have money to live anywhere else." The words hurt deeply, not because a little girl said them, but because they showed me what Diego had been telling his daughter about me. In her innocent mind, I wasn't her grandmother who loved her. I was a poor old lady her parents felt sorry for. "Daddy says many things," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "Sometimes grown-ups don't tell the whole truth." That afternoon, while Sophia napped and the house was quiet, I made a choice that would change everything. I called my old friend Maria, who worked at the bank downtown. "Rose, so good to hear from you," Maria said warmly. "How are you doing living with Diego and Carmen?" "Actually, Maria, that's why I'm calling. I need to ask you about something important. Diego says he owns this house now. Is that true?" There was a pause. "Well, honey, he inherited the house when Carlos died, but you have the right to live there for your whole life. He can't make you leave, Rose. Did he tell you something different?" "He said it would be better if I found my own place." Maria's voice became sharp. "That's his opinion, not the law. You have the right to stay in that house until you die. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." After hanging up, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Power. Diego had lied to me. Tried to trick me into giving up my home. The trusting mother in me would have been hurt. The woman I was becoming felt only cold determination. If my son wanted to play games, I was about to teach him how they were really played. Chance came. Faster than I expected. 2 days later, Carmen announced they were having another dinner party. This time for Diego's actual birthday, which I had somehow forgotten was coming up. The guest list would be smaller but more important. Big bosses from his company, Carmen's fancy friends, and some neighbors from their expensive social club. "We need everything perfect," Carmen said, looking at her phone while giving me my orders. "Drinks, dinner and dessert. Something that shows we have good taste and class." "Of course," I said, already making plans. The next few days flew by with preparations. I ordered flowers, planned all the food, and made the house look like something from a fancy magazine. Carmen took credit for everything naturally, posting pictures on her social media of the party planning that was really just her pointing at things I had arranged and saying they looked nice. The night of the party, I worked harder than ever before. The table looked perfect. My mother's dishes, crystal glasses that caught the candlelight, silverware that shined like mirrors. The food was special. Roasted chicken with herbs, vegetables from my little garden, and a chocolate cake that took hours to make perfectly. Everything that would impress Diego's work friends and make him look successful. I wore my nicest black dress, not expensive like Carmen's clothes, but neat and proper. I had done my hair and makeup carefully, wanting to look like the owner of the house I actually was, not the servant. They had made me pretend to be. The guests arrived exactly at 7. I recognized some faces from the previous party, including Robert Thompson, who smiled at me in that knowing way again. The others were new, more important bosses, their wives wearing jewelry and designer clothes, the kind of people who thought being rich was normal and expected. I served drinks in the living room, moving quietly between guests, refilling glasses and offering small snacks. The conversation flowed around me like I was invisible. Talk about investments, vacation houses, complaints about their children's expensive private schools. These people lived in a bubble so thick they couldn't see anything outside their own wealthy world. "Diego, you must tell me who does your catering," said Mrs. Patterson, the wife of another boss. "These appetizers are delicious." Diego smiled big, accepting the compliment like he had made them himself. Oh, we have our ways. He looked at me across the room and winked like we. To send our children to good schools, to live the comfortable life Diego now thought he deserved. Yes, I said, my voice shaking. That was me many years ago. Not so many years, Thompson said, his eyes bright with interest. I remember when you sold to Premier Foods. Smart business move. You walked away with what, $12 million? The number hung in the air between us. 14 million, actually. But who was counting? Money I had invested carefully over the years. Money that had grown much larger. Money that Diego knew nothing about because I had kept my finances private after Carlos died. I'm confused, Thompson continued. What are you doing serving food at your son's dinner party? Before I could answer, Diego appeared next to us. His face red from wine and excitement. Mr. Thompson, I hope you're having a good time. The food is amazing, isn't it? Yes, it certainly is, Thompson replied, his voice carefully neutral. I was just talking with Mrs. Martinez about her old business. Diego's smile became smaller. Oh, Mama's little catering thing. That was years ago. Ancient history. $14 million isn't exactly ancient history, Thompson said quietly. The words exploded in the room like a bomb. Diego's face went white, then red, then white again. Around us, conversations continued, but I could feel the energy changing, the way social power was suddenly shifting directions. I'm sorry, what? Diego managed to say. Thompson looked between us, clearly seeing he had walked into something complicated. Your mother built one of the most successful catering businesses in the state. When she sold it, she made enough money to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Diego turned to stare at me, his face showing shock, confusion, and something that looked like fear. For the first time in years, he was seeing me not as the helpless woman who cleaned his house, but as someone with money, with choices, with power he never knew existed. Mama, he whispered, his voice cracking. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt completely empty inside. No love, no anger, no disappointment. Just a cold, clear view of a man who had systematically destroyed our relationship through his own selfishness and cruelty. We'll discuss this later, I said calmly, then turned and walked back toward the kitchen. Behind me, I could hear Thompson's voice, controlled but loud enough for others to hear. Diego, I think there might be some things about your family you don't understand. The evening was about to become very interesting indeed. I went back to the kitchen, my hands steady as I put the final touches on dinner. Through the doorway, I could see Diego talking intensely with Thompson, their conversation serious and quiet. Carmen had noticed the tension and was walking over. Her smile bright but her eyes sharp like a hunter sensing danger or opportunity. The dining room filled with excitement as guests took their seats. I had planned the seating carefully. Thompson at Diego's right side, Carmen controlling the conversation at the other end. I served each course with calm precision, invisible again now that the shocking moment had passed. But I could feel eyes watching me, whispered conversations that stopped when I came near tables, the electric feeling of gossip starting to spread. Rose, dear, Mrs. Patterson called out as I filled her wine glass. Robert was telling us the most interesting story about a catering business. Didn't you used to work in that field? The question was loaded with fake sweetness, the tone rich women used when they were fishing for information they could use later at their club lunches. I did, I replied simply, not giving her more to work with. How exciting! What kind of catering? Before I could answer, Diego's voice cut across the table, loud enough for everyone to hear. His face was red with wine and embarrassment, his voice carrying that angry edge men get when they feel their control slipping away. Oh, Mama had a small business helping local restaurants with their events. Nothing too fancy, mostly setting up buffets and serving food at parties. She was always good at cleaning up after people. The dismissal was so complete, so cruel, that several guests looked uncomfortable. Thompson's face darkened, but he stayed quiet. I felt every conversation in the room pause, waiting to see how I would respond to being reduced to a cleaning lady at my own dinner table. I smiled and continued serving wine. "How nice that you remember," I said mildly. But Diego wasn't finished. Wine had made him bold, and maybe Thompson's earlier questions had scared him more than I realized. He seemed determined to take back control of the story, to put me back in the small box where he needed me to stay. "Actually," he continued, his voice getting louder, "since we're all being honest tonight, I should probably explain something about our living situation." Carmen's face went pale. She knew Diego well enough to know when he was about to say something terrible. "Diego," she warned quietly. But he ignored her. No, it's fine. These are friends." He waved his hand around the table. "The truth is, Mama doesn't really live here like a normal family member. We took her in after Papa died because she had nowhere else to go. It's more like we're taking care of her." The silence that followed was crushing. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Wine glasses froze in midair. I could hear the social calculations being made in every mind around the table. Who was lying? Who was confused? What was the real story behind this increasingly strange dinner party? Thompson cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, Diego, but I think you might be confused about something." "No confusion at all," Diego interrupted, feeling brave because he thought people were supporting him. "Mama helps around the house. She's actually very good at it. Cooking, cleaning, you know. We let her stay because, well, what else could she do at her age? It works out for everyone." He paused, then said the words that would destroy his life. "Think of her as our housekeeper. We let her stay out of pity. She's good with a mop." The words hit the room like a slap in the face. Mrs. Patterson gasped out loud. Two other wives looked shocked. The men moved uncomfortably in their chairs, recognizing cruelty even when it was dressed up as honesty. But Diego wasn't finished. Drunk on wine and his own false confidence, he turned to Thompson with a knowing grin. "I mean, Mr. Thompson, you understand how it is with older relatives. Sometimes you have to be creative about managing their expectations. Mama has some interesting ideas about her past business, but we've learned it's easier to just let her have her little fantasies." The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Thompson set down his wine glass with careful control, his face showing controlled disgust. "Diego," he said quietly, "are you absolutely sure that's how you want to describe your mother?" "Of course. I mean, look at her." Diego laughed, and the sound was ugly and harsh. Suffered what I had allowed to happen and what I was capable of doing in response. "Actually, Diego," Thompson said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had made him successful in business, "I know exactly who your mother is. The question is, do you?" He turned to speak to the entire table, his voice clear and strong. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Rose Martinez, former owner and CEO of Martinez Catering Company, one of the most successful food service businesses in our region. When she sold her company 8 years ago, she walked away with $14 million. The announcement hit the room like an explosion. Forks clattered against plates. Someone's wine glass fell over, sending red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. "Mrs. Martinez," Thompson continued, never taking his eyes off Diego's increasingly horrified face, revolutionized event catering for corporate clients and high-end weddings. She employed over 50 people and had contracts with major companies throughout the state. Diego's face had gone from red to white to green. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "But perhaps most important to tonight," Thompson said, his voice getting stronger, "is that Rose Martinez currently has a net worth of approximately $25 million, making her one of the wealthiest women in this county. Wealthy enough to buy and sell most of the businesses represented at this table." Carmen made a small choking sound. Around the table, guests stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to awe to barely hidden greed. The social power in the evening had just completely reversed. "Now, Diego," Thompson continued, his tone conversational but deadly, "would you like to reconsider your description of your mother as domestic help who lives here out of pity?" Diego looked at me, his eyes wide with panic and growing understanding. For the first time in years he was seeing me clearly. Not as the broken woman he had convinced himself I was, but as the powerful force I had always been. The woman who had built an empire while he was learning to ride a bicycle. The woman who could destroy his career, his marriage, his entire life with a single phone call. "Mama," he whispered, his voice breaking like a teenager's. I was just. I walked slowly around the table until I stood directly behind his chair. The room was so quiet I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. The soft sound of expensive fabric as guests leaned forward to catch every word. "Just what, Diego?" I asked, my voice perfectly calm. "Just lying to your friends about who I am. Just telling your daughter that her grandmother is a charity case. Just trying to convince me to give up my legal rights to my own home." His shoulders shook. Real tears were starting in his eyes. Not tears of sorrow but tears of fear. Fear of exposure, fear of consequences. Fear of the woman he had systematically underestimated and abused. "Please," he whispered so quietly only I could hear. "Please don't do this. Not here. Not in front of them." I leaned down until my mouth was next to his ear, close enough that my words would be for him alone. "You want to know what pity looks like, Diego?" I whispered. "Pity is what I felt for you 5 minutes ago when I still thought there might be something left of the son I raised. But pity has limits, and you just found mine." I straightened up and spoke to the table, my voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding rooms full of powerful people. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm afraid dinner is over." The guests began to whisper among themselves, gathering their things with the practiced efficiency of people who knew when to leave a social disaster. Thompson lingered, catching my eye with a nod that showed unmistakable respect. As the last guest walked out, I turned to look at Diego and Carmen, both pale and shaking in their chairs. "We need to have a conversation," I said simply. And for the first time in 3 years, they listened without argument. The house felt different after the last guest left. The same rooms, the same furniture, but the balance of power had completely changed. Diego and Carmen sat at the dining table like students waiting for punishment, while I moved around the room, blowing out candles and stacking plates with the same calm efficiency I had shown all evening. "Mama, please." Diego finally broke the silence, his voice shaking. "Let me try to explain." "Explain what?" I didn't look up from collecting the wine glasses. "Explain how you've been stealing from me for 3 years while telling people I'm your charity case. Explain how you've turned your daughter against me. Or maybe you want to explain how you plan to steal my house by lying about the will." Carmen shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her designer dress wrinkled, her makeup smeared. "Rose, you have to understand our situation. Diego's career. Diego's career." I finally looked at her, and she flinched at what she saw in my eyes. "Yes, let's talk about Diego's career. The career that started with money from my business. The law school I paid for. The first apartment I helped him buy. The wedding expenses I covered. Should I continue?" That was what parents do," Diego stammered. "You wanted to help." "I did want to help." Past tense. I set the stack of plates down carefully, each movement precise and controlled. "But helping your child succeed and being used by them are 2 different things." I walked to the liquor cabinet and poured myself a glass of the expensive scotch that Carlos had collected. Scotch that Diego had been drinking without permission, never thinking to ask. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, settling into the chair that had been Carlos's favorite. "Tomorrow morning, you're going to start looking for your own place to live. I'm giving you 60 days to find something and move out." "You can't do that." Carmen jumped to her feet. "This is our home now. Sophia's school, our friends, everything is here. This was never your home. It's my house, which I allowed you to live in while you were supposedly helping me through my grief. That arrangement is now over." Diego's face crumpled. Mama, please. If you make us leave, how will it look? My reputation at the firm. Your reputation. I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. Diego, by tomorrow morning, everyone at your company will know exactly once used to restructure failing businesses. They would leave my house within 60 days. Diego would resign from his job rather than wait to be fired, because Thompson would make sure he was fired. They would receive no financial help from me, no recommendations, no assistance of any kind. But what about Sophia? Diego pleaded. She's your granddaughter. You can't punish her for our mistakes. The same Sophia you taught to see me as a poor old lady you felt sorry for? The same granddaughter you told that. Abuela Rose was just someone who cleaned your house. I shook my head. No, Diego. You made your choices about what kind of relationship she would have with me. Now you get to live with those choices. Carmen tried a different approach. Rose, you're obviously hurt, and you have every right to be. But think about your family legacy. Carlos wouldn't have wanted this kind of fighting. Don't. The word came out like a whip crack. Don't you dare use my husband's name. Carlos would be disgusted by what his son has become. He would be horrified by the way you've treated the woman he loved. I stood up, smoothing down my dress with the same careful attention to detail I had shown all evening. This conversation is over. You have 60 days. Use them wisely. As I walked toward the stairs, Diego called out one last desperate plea. Mama, what if we apologize? What if we try to make this right somehow? I paused at the bottom of the staircase and turned back to look at him. This man who had once been my baby, my first child, the little boy I had dreamed about while Carlos and I planned our future together. The child I had worked for, sacrificed for, loved without conditions even when that love wasn't returned. Now I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even disappointment. Just a cold, clear assessment of a problem that needed to be solved. Diego, I said quietly, there are some things that can't be undone. Some words that can't be taken back. Some betrayals that are too complete for forgiveness. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom. My bedroom in my house, bought with my money, and closed the door behind me. For the first time in 3 years I locked it. The next morning I woke before sunrise and made my first phone call to my lawyer, Patricia Santos. The second call went to my financial advisor. The third to a private investigator I had used occasionally for business purposes during my catering days. By the time Diego and Carmen came downstairs, still looking shocked from the previous evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a stack of legal papers. What's all this? Carmen asked nervously. Protection, I replied. Diego, I had Patricia research your employment contract. Apparently, there's a clause about behavior that embarrasses the company. Very interesting reading. Diego went pale. You wouldn't. I also had a long conversation with my investigator about your spending habits. Did you know it's possible to track every dollar you've used from the joint account I set up for household expenses? I slid a folder across the table. Credit card statements, bank records, receipts. $18,000 in the last 4 months alone, spent on everything from spa treatments to golf memberships. All documented, all traceable, all legally questionable given our original agreement. They stared at the papers like they were poison snakes. Here's what's going to happen, I continued in my business voice. You're going to leave my house quietly and without drama. You're not going to contact reporters. You're not going to badmouth me to anyone. And you're not going to use my granddaughter as emotional blackmail. In return, I won't pursue legal action for fraud, and I won't make sure these documents find their way to the State Bar Association's Ethics Committee. And if we don't agree? Matilda asked, though we all knew she already knew the answer. I smiled, and it was the coldest expression I had ever worn. Then you'll discover exactly how ruthless a successful businesswoman can be when she decides to destroy someone completely. Diego looked at his wife, then back at me. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I've had 3 years to think about it, Diego. 3 years of being treated like a servant in my own home while you planned to steal it from me. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Did you honestly believe I was the helpless old woman you pretended I was? He had no answer for that. Neither of them did. 59 days, I said, gathering up the documents. I suggest you start packing. As I walked out of the kitchen, I heard Carmen begin to cry. Soft, desperate sobs that might have moved me once upon a time, when I still believed family bonds were sacred and love could overcome any betrayal. But that woman was gone, and the woman who had taken her place felt only satisfaction at the sound of her daughter-in-law's tears. 3 weeks later, I stood in my living room watching the moving truck pull away from my driveway. Diego and Carmen's departure had been as efficient and emotionless as I had demanded. No dramatic scenes, no last-minute begging for forgiveness, no tearful goodbyes with the granddaughter they had turned against me. Just boxes, furniture, and the hollow sound of a house finally returning to its rightful owner. Sophia had cried naturally. 6-year-olds don't understand the complex reasons why adults hurt each other. She only knew her grandmother had suddenly become a stranger who didn't want them around anymore. Diego had tried to use her tears as one final manipulation, suggesting I was punishing an innocent child for her parents' mistakes. I felt nothing watching those tears. Nothing but cold satisfaction that Diego was finally learning what it felt like to lose something precious because of his own choices. The house felt different now. Cleaner. The heavy weight of resentment and exploitation had lifted, leaving behind only space and possibility. I walked through each room methodically, reclaiming territories that had been occupied by people who saw me as an inconvenience to be managed. In Diego's former office I found a stack of papers he had forgotten in his rush to leave. Bills, insurance forms, financial statements. The debris of a life lived beyond one's means. At the bottom of the pile was a letter from his company, dated 2 days ago. I opened it without hesitation. Privacy was a courtesy I no longer extended to people who had violated mine so completely. Dear Mr. Martinez, it began. Following recent events and their impact on company morale and client confidence, we regret to inform you that your employment with Thompson Industries has been terminated effective immediately. Perfect. Thompson had moved even faster than I had expected. My phone rang as I was burning the letter in the fireplace. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. Mrs. Martinez, this is Lisa Chen from Channel 12 News. We've heard some interesting stories about a dinner party incident involving give interviews. However, you might want to speak with Robert Thompson from Thompson Industries. I believe he has some very interesting thoughts on professional ethics and family values. After hanging up, I poured myself a glass of wine and settled into Carlos's favorite chair. The local news would run the story. They always did when it involved wealthy families destroying themselves in public. By tomorrow, everyone in our county would know exactly what kind of man Diego Martinez really was. The irony was perfect. Diego had been so worried about his professional reputation, so careful to maintain the image of success and respectability. Now his name would be associated with cruelty and ingratitude. The very people he had tried to impress would avoid him like he had a disease. Over the following days, I received a series of phone calls that confirmed everything was going exactly as I had planned. Patricia Santos called to tell me that Diego had hired a lawyer to contest my decision to evict them, but had dropped the case after reviewing the evidence of their financial misconduct. My financial advisor called to report unusual activity on accounts Diego had access to, desperate attempts to withdraw funds that no longer existed because I had quietly closed those accounts the morning after the dinner party. The private investigator had the most interesting update. They've moved into a small apartment in Riverside, he reported. Public school district, no security, street. Parking only. Mrs. Martinez is working part-time at a department store downtown. Mr. Martinez is still unemployed. Word has gotten around about what happened at that dinner party. And the child enrolled at the local elementary school. From what I can observe, she's having trouble adjusting to the change in circumstances. I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, then crushed it ruthlessly. Sophia was learning valuable lessons about consequences and the real world. Lessons her parents should have taught her years ago. "Thank you for the update," I said. "I won't be needing your services anymore." A month after they left, Carmen called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Rose, please," she said without introduction, her voice thick with tears. "Sophia is asking about you constantly. She doesn't understand why Abuela doesn't want to see her anymore. She's having bad dreams, and her teacher says she's not doing well in school. She thinks she did something wrong." "She did do something wrong," I replied calmly. "She learned to see me as less than family. She learned that disrespect has no consequences. Now she's learning that it does. She's just a baby. She doesn't deserve this." "No, she doesn't. But she got it anyway because her parents chose to sacrifice their relationship with me for temporary convenience. Actions have consequences, Carmen. This is what consequences look like." She cried into the phone. "Diego's been trying to find work, but everyone knows what happened. No company will hire him. We're barely making rent. Sophia had to leave all her friends behind, and she blames herself for everything. Diego should have thought about that before he called me his charity case in front of his boss. You should have thought about that before you spent 3 years treating me like your personal servant. Please, Rose, I'm begging you. If not for us, then for Sophia. She's innocent in all this." I considered her words for a moment, then dismissed them. "Innocence is a luxury, Carmen. Your daughter is learning that early. Consider it an education." I hung up on her tears and immediately blocked their number. 6 months later, I ran into Mrs. Patterson at the grocery store. She approached me with the careful respect wealthy people show to those who have proven themselves more powerful than expected. "Rose, how wonderful to see you. I've been meaning to call. We're organizing a charity auction for the Children's Hospital, and we'd be honored if you'd consider joining our planning committee." The same woman who had whispered behind her hand at Diego's attempts to humiliate me now wanted to associate with my success. The same social circle that had watched my public humiliation now competed for my attention and approval. "How thoughtful," I replied. "I'll have my assistant send a check. I'm afraid I'm too busy to attend planning meetings." I had no assistant, but Mrs. Patterson didn't need to know that. The suggestion that I had people to handle such trivial social obligations only added to my mystique. As I drove home through the tree-lined streets of my exclusive neighborhood, I reflected on the completeness of my victory. Diego and Carmen had lost everything. Their home, their social standing, their financial security, their daughter's innocence. They were learning to live on love alone and discovering that love without resources is a cold and hungry companion. Meanwhile, I had my house back, my dignity restored, and my reputation as someone not to be crossed firmly established. The phone calls from old business contacts had started again. Invitations to exclusive events arrived daily. People who had forgotten Rose Martinez existed were suddenly eager to renew their friendship with someone who could buy and sell them without thinking twice. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house Carlos and I had chosen together 20 years ago. The roses were blooming again, bright pink petals that caught the evening light like drops of happiness. Beautiful and hopeful, just like justice served properly. Inside, I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it in a silent toast to the photograph of Carlos on the mantelpiece. "They learned my love," I said aloud. "They finally learned what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." The house was quiet around me. Not the tense quiet of resentment and exploitation, but the peaceful quiet of a space that belonged entirely to me. No ungrateful children demanding forgiveness for their consequences. No granddaughter who had been taught to see me as less than family. No daughter-in-law calculating how much of my wealth she could claim. Just me, my victory, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the world does deliver perfect justice. Some people might call what I did harsh. They might say that family should forgive, that love should win over pride, that grandmothers should put Their grandchildren's needs above their own dignity. Those people have never been called a housekeeper by their own son. They've never had their life's work dismissed as simple party planning. They've never watched their grandchild learn to see them as servants rather than family. They've never discovered the cold, clear truth that some betrayals are too complete for redemption. I have learned that truth, and I am better for it. Stronger, freer, finally completely myself again. If Diego and Carmen and their daughter have learned that actions have consequences, that respect